So I'm going to ask you guys a really interesting question, and I want to hear from Ben first here. If you're starting a franchise right now and you get one player to start with, would you take Nikola Jokic or Donovan Mitchell?
That's a difficult question. I think mostly because you want to look at how the league is progressing, and with um, with a player like Donovan Mitchell, he's shown that he's grown and he's been incredible. I will have to say, while I do think while I do think the league will start having more of him, I'd have to go with not just from this series, but I have to go with just uh, with everything that we've seen. Probably Nikola Jokic, just because we haven't seen or we don't see like players like Donovan Mitchell who can get to the basket, who can drive, who can do a lot for your offense and is really great defensively. We don't really see like silky touch
It doesn't
shooter
exist.
like centers like that. Yeah, not as much. Or at least I'm sure in the next 10, 15 years we'll see more because we've seen, you know, even on his team, you can consider someone like Bull Bull or someone like a Joel Embiid or an Anthony Davis, but Anthony Davis is a whole different level than Nikola
Yeah.
Jokic. But yeah, I think you don't really see someone like a Nikola Jokic that often. I think right now, if you were to start a team, I'd pick him because not only can he can shoot, he's a good enough defender. He also is one of the best
Passers?
passing big we've seen in the league. So I'd take Nikola Jokic.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying about Jokic being a better passer. Although these two guys are really, really close when it comes to bringing something to the team, they both bring something different. And Brandon, what are your thoughts on what Ben just said?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to kind of agree with him. I think you're gonna have another Donovan Mitchell type player, um, guy that can create his own shot as a slasher, can
Are
take
you
you off the
saying
dribble.
are you saying Donovan Mitchell's role isn't as important to a team that's starting a franchise as Nikola Jokic's would be?
No, because obviously he's a franchise player. Like I think Donovan Mitchell is a franchise player. He has to be in that discussion of you have to build a team around him. I think it's a team with centers, not centers, shooters around him, and they've done that with the Jazz. And the Jazz have done that with guys like Jordan Clarkson, Joe Ingles, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Mike Conley also,
Yep.
who's really stepped up coming back after the birth of his son. So, yeah, I think that's another key point as to why Utah's doing well. But
So,
um, I
so do
just
you
don't.
give the nod to Jokic?
I do, and just because I feel like how Ben's saying, like you need a do it all center, and we're still in a period where you have guys like Nurkic, like Whiteside, like JaVale, guys that are
Shot
dominant,
blockers?
shot blockers, rim protectors, great rebounders, but offensively they're low post scorers.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. A lot of the times when you do have a solely defensive player, like Rudy Gobert even, there's sometimes a liability on offense when you need a bucket down low. And
I think with Jokic, it just gives you the option to play your center because he can be playing out there. Maybe against a team like Houston
yeah,
who
I feel
plays
like
small ball.
especially talking about a player being out there on the court, what's really important about Jokic is his free throw shooting too. We know when it comes down to the wire, he can stay in the basketball game because they're not just going to hack him and or just run him off the court. He can stay
Right.
with the
Not like an
people.
on-the-run situation.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, Sam, what are your thoughts?
Man, if you asked me before the series, I would have said Jokic all the way. 100% convinced. Dude, I hear what you guys are saying about how Jokic is irreplaceable, whereas you could find several Donovan Mitchells throughout the NBA. But I don't care. You give me Donovan Mitchell, and I'll be happy. I think you have more options when you're starting a team around a guard than around a center. We've seen, no matter how good of a shooter Jokic is, because he's above average for a center, that's for sure. right? You could comfortably assume that he'll make a shot.
Jokic
If
is
he's wide open.
probably in the top 5 centers in the league, Sam.
Yeah.
He's not just above average.
Well, I'm talking about from
with special
shooting beyond the arc.
Okay.
I was
Yeah,
referring to that
still
specifically.
top 5.
So he's definitely competent from out there. But we've seen a lot of teams experiment. And I'm not just talking about Houston, where they don't even have a single center on their team that gets significant minutes. I'm talking about in general. We saw the Warriors play small ball lineups for 20 minutes at a time, and that was what they would refer to as their death lineup. We've seen teams even go further back, like the Miami Heat would run, Chris Bosh, who was a power forward for his whole life at center, and they would, get away with that. So I think that if you have a star guard like Donovan Mitchell, you have more options with what to do on the floor. If your best player is a center, you have to play that center. And there's a lot of strategies like we've seen, the Jazz do, for example, to really neutralize the efficiency of Jokic. It's a lot harder to slow down a guy like Mitchell.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying. First of all, Donovan Mitchell is more of a microwave kind of player. You know what I mean? When he gets going, there's not really any stopping him. And when you're trying to win games and championships, which is the goal when you're starting a franchise, you want to be a contender. And both of these guys are super young, but with Nikola Jokic as your star, I feel like you need so many things to go right. Although you can throw in anybody and they'll look good with Nikola Jokic, you want efficiency too. So luckily they have a player like Jamal Murray who meshes perfectly with them. But how difficult is it to get a good point guard that can also distribute the ball? I mean, we've seen Sam's, like you were going back to the teams with Miami. Who was their point guard? You get Mario Chalmers and Norris Cole, not two of the biggest household names out there, but
no, I think LeBron was their point guard.
Nah, okay, but you know what I mean.
He handled point guard responsibilities.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Donovan Mitchell probably can do that. I know Nikola Jokic can at the 5. He can run a lot of your offense plays in the half court and do a lot of things people don't normally see out of a big man. But I'm gonna have to go with you here, Sam. Donovan Mitchell's just a more dynamic player, and when you're starting a franchise, it's good to sell tickets too, because although Nikola Jokic is a great player, I don't know if he's the best at selling a team.
Well, the thing is, and I understand what you're saying, when you are building a team, you still have to build around your star player. It would still be difficult to get play. It would still be, we've seen with, what's his name? We've seen with Rudy Gobert that really they have to also have chemistry on the court, on and off the court together. And we saw that, the whole experience play out kind of when Rudy Gobert tested positive. I think with Nikola Jokic, there is a point to be made that with Donovan Mitchell, you can run more small ball offense. But with Nikola Jokic, he adds that facet of, sure, if you take him off, he's not the best, but you also, like, as you said, if you're building a team, you have to build kind of to make sure that player isn't, you also have to build for that player not to be your defining characteristic. We look at Miami where Jimmy Butler's, not really arguably, but is their best player right now. But when you take him off the floor, you still have so many other options. And I think with Nikola Jokic, he adds more options to your team than Donovan Mitchell. Because
that's actually where my reasoning disagrees with that. Because I think as great as Jokic is, and he makes the guys around him better. That's usually his biggest, right? The biggest plus in his book is he makes the guys around him better. And that wins you a lot of regular season games, right? We've seen the Nuggets be 50, 60 win teams pretty much ever since he got there. But clearly we've seen that doesn't really win you series. He has to rely on other guys to step up because he could only set you up for a shot. You have to make it.
No, Sam, I see what you're saying, but
you need
Nikola
shot
Jokic,
makers around him.
But Nikola Jokic is a shot maker. He's been proving it too. He can hit the clutch post shots. He's made several game winners throughout his career. I do see the point Ben and Brandon are making. These are two amazing players. I'm not discounting any of them by saying I would take Donovan Mitchell.
Oh, of course
But
not. I'd love to have a Jokic on my team.
as we were saying, the NBA is modernizing, and going back to Ben's point, where he said we would see more centers like Jokic in the future. So I don't think they would be that hard to come by with the prospects that are coming into the draft in the future. So I'm going with the player. You don't see much great two guards. There's like the elite shooting guards in the league, and then there's a massive fallout. So at a time during the end of Dwayne Wade's career, he was like the third best shooting guard in the league. Right behind him was C.J. McCollum. This was a few years back, but D Wade getting close to retire was still a top shooting guard. These shooting guards are slim, and Donovan Mitchell just fills that team void, and you can't really pass up on a great player like him.
Yeah, and I feel like you could build a team around him easier because the pieces around him don't have to fit a certain identity. You know, with Jokic, you have to have high IQ players who know where they have to be so that he can find them without even looking. You know, with Donovan Mitchell, you could put guys that, you know, maybe play more physical, maybe play more aggressive, or maybe are just, you know, more passive, stand in the corner, wait for my shot guys. You have a lot more options with the way you want to build that team. Whereas Jokic, if you're not running a motion offense with, you know, intricate play calling and, you know, giving him the opportunity to really show off his passing ability, you're not really using him right. So it kind of locks you into a certain box if you go with a guy like Jokic. And that goes for other guys like, for example, like Lonzo Ball, right, where his big thing is his vision, but he can't really do much else, right? So you have to put perfect players around him for him to even look half decent on the floor. Jokic is obviously a completely different player. That was just the most extreme example I could think of, so don't, you know, go around thinking I'm comparing the two.
Ben and Brandon, any rebuttal, any last thoughts on the topic before we move on?
I think, honestly, yeah, Sam, you do have a point where, like, with Jokic, you do need high basketball IQ players. And Jonathan, you made a good point that there's a bit of a drop-off when it comes to, like, all right, there's Donovan, there's CJ, there's Clay.
Devin Booker.
Booker.
Harden,
and then there's a drop-off, right? I mean, I'm sure I missed a couple, but there is a drop-off. Buddy Hield can be in that place, too. And then there's a big drop-off. But I feel like there's more developing guards in the league, I think. I think you look at guys like RJ Barrett, my bad. Tyler Hero. I was thinking like DeAndre Hunter also, but he's a forward. Tyler Hero.
Guys who haven't really made that next step to be
one of the
these
top
guys
guards. Are rookies, but there are more. I feel like there are more developing guards in the league right now that could eventually make that next step into one of the 6 names I just mentioned, like the status of one of those 6 names.
And also to your point, Jonathan, where you say, oh, well, to like the rebuttal on my point in 10, 15 years. But if you're building a team around a star, you would want to win as soon as possible. You know, while I do think, you know, as like Shaq put it, the old center is gone. Is becoming obsolete.
It's an endangered species.
Yeah. It still has a long way to go to kind of modernize itself. Of course, we've seen players that we've seen, you know, Joel Embiid who can shoot from the outside, Nikola Jokic, and other players and other centers. But I think when you talk about
Kelly O.
No, but when you talk about that kind of when you talk about that position, in 10, 15 years, yeah, sure, there'll probably be a good number of those of centers that can shoot threes, that can pass well. You know, I know he isn't, but he somewhat plays it. But Bam Adebayo is one of those players as well. But if you're going to win in 4 or 5 years, you can't kind of hope for the future. You have to kind of go with, okay, this guy is one of the most modern players we've seen, one of the most modern style players we've seen out of his position. Let's take him rather than, and yes, shooting guard is supremely important.
Yeah, it's
But you have
valuable.
a center that can basically do it all. And yes, it could box you in if you have that. But also the high IQ comes with coaching as well, and it comes with learning under a system. And we'll get to him, but under a
Exactly.
system like Brett Brown, there's no way a Joel Embiid would really like a Jokic who can pass around, can really do that, will be able to flourish as much as he has in Denver.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying. Brandon, you had one last thought?
Yeah, and I just to bounce off what Ben was saying, I just feel like I think I just feel like it does have to be in the right system. Mike Malone has done a fantastic job building around building around Jokic. I mean, you guys have Murray, Gary Harris, Will Barton. Like these are very good shooters around them, and you also add guys like Paul Millsap and
Michael Porter Jr.,
who's up and coming right now and has been killing it.
Don't tell Sam that twice. He's a big Porter guy.
Another one I felt like was a very underrated trade that I just loved for the Nuggets. You do have to surround them with right players. Yes, with Donovan Mitchell, you can have more physical players and you could have more shooters around them. But I think it's the same thing with Jokic. You can you can also spread the offense, and he can also create his own shot. I don't think we've mentioned that. He could also create his own shot. Like he can take you off the dribble and either pull up from like a mid-range or turnaround or take you to the basket. Like he
Yeah.
can do it all center. And I just feel like I feel like you can build around him a little bit more easily than you can build around Donovan Mitchell, because I feel like you have to play more towards what Donovan Mitchell can do at that moment. While Jokic, you can, I think obviously I think you can just tell from day one that this guy was a point center almost.
Yeah, one last little fruit for thought before we move on to the lottery. Dirk Nowitzki and Stephen Curry kind of are what going back to what Ben said, are evolving what the center looks like. They're two pioneers of, obviously Curry's shooting has every person trying to shoot from deep because it's just fun to watch, and it's obviously, as Sam and I were discussing in the past, it's very efficient. So Dirk Nowitzki kind of started the movement into converting fours into fives, but then Steph Curry just really put it into the young players' minds that shooting is the new wave.